Hello and welcome to That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are back in those fantasy guys.
Season number 7.
7.
Episode number 1.
1.
NFL week number 1.
1.
Jay, welcome back.
Welcome back, Rick. I'd like to congratulate you on a great year last year, a great draft this year, and I'm looking forward to fantasy football. I know you're looking forward to fantasy football. Some of you out there have wives, you have girlfriends, you have significant others. You all have fantasies of winning the fantasy football championship. And we're here to help you from coast to coast, places like Denver, Oshkosh, Washington, Urbana, Illinois, South Fulton County, Georgia, and all places in between. Me and Rick know everything there is to know about fantasy football between us, yet we agree on nothing.
That's true. Welcome to the show. We hope that we can provide you with all of the information that you need for fantasy success in 2016, starting right now with hashtag trending. Jay, let me have it.
I just don't understand. I've been reading up, doing some research. That's what we do on fantasy football. We got to look at the metrics. And there is this myth on drafting wide receivers, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 overall. I don't understand it. I don't get how anybody could draft a wide receiver in the top 5 over a stud running back. Only 7 running backs gained over 1,000 yards last year. And when you have a pick early in the first round, when there's players like Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, even though he's suspended, he ain't suspended for the playoffs yet. You're out of your mind if you draft a wide receiver. It's all about depth. And the 6 running backs I listed, that's it for elite depth at the running back position. For instance, I got a message about a month ago from my boy C. Swifty about a keeper league, and he had the availability to keep David Johnson or Allen Robinson. Okay, now David Johnson is an RB1 going in the 2, 3, 4 range overall. Allen Robinson is a wide receiver, low-end wide receiver run going in the 7, 8, 9 range overall. The average draft position of David Johnson is 2, 3, 4 maybe, and Allen Robinson is somewhere in the teens. In 0 drafts is Allen Robinson getting drafted before David Johnson. What I mean to say, in 0 drafts, should he be drafted before David Johnson? But the fact that this is even a question or a conversation just lends credence to the craziness that people put so much value in wide receivers. Stop it now. If you have a chance at an elite running back, you get your elite running back and set your roster from there.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. We had a conversation this summer where a few years ago we were talking about how fantasy wide receivers had really become more valuable than the running backs because of split situations and things like that. Now I think that fantasy wide receivers have become so prevalent in everyone's mind that it makes the running backs all that more valuable because, as you mentioned, there's only a handful of them that are worth owning as a number 1 running back. And if you have an opportunity to grab one before one of these stud wide receivers, a position that's very, very deep,
yes,
then you absolutely have to do it. It's a great way to start a draft. Speaking of starting things, what a way to start the show. Let's move on to key injuries. Jay, it's like a flashback from last year because when we were making the graphic for key injuries this year, and let's see it when you get a chance, Tony Romo is a name that we didn't have to take off of last year's graphic. He was injured in the last show of last year's game. Last show of last season. So Tony Romo remains on the list. Tyler Eifert, Jamal Charles, and Julio Jones. Some big names on that list, Jay. Who's jumping off at you?
Well, I'd be very curious about the Jamal Charles situation. Stud running back, but not one of the elite ones because of the injury. When he went out last year, Spencer Ware got some good playing time. So I feel like they might be bringing him back a little slower than people had anticipated, even when they drafted a week ago. Yeah. So I think that's the situation to keep an eye on because if you drafted Jamal Charles, I hope you handcuffed him with another running back.
Absolutely. I was able to grab Spencer Ware in the last pick of one of my drafts a couple weeks ago. And it makes me wish that we had this television show on a couple weeks ago because I was screaming about Spencer Ware to everybody that would listen, and I had no audience to talk to. So there was no gratification because everybody thought I was crazy. But I digress.
Because you are crazy.
A little bit. Let's move on to sneaky starts. The first sneaky start of the season. Jay, who do you have in that spot, that prestigious sneaky start spot, week number 1?
Well, I'd like to also point out, because besides those injuries, you also have the suspensions of Tom Brady, Le'Veon Bell, and Josh Gordon. So these are all people that got drafted. So these are people, along with the injuries, that you're going to have to replace. And what I looked at was, if you drafted Tom Brady as your number 1 quarterback, which is a great pick, because what you could do is draft Tom Brady and then spot start for the first 4 weeks, and then you have Tom Brady for the rest of the season, and most importantly, the playoff run. And what I'm looking at, while Tom Brady is out on his 4-game suspension for, organized cheating conspiracy, you could do worse than Brock Osweiler. He's only starting right now in 14% of leagues. He has a great matchup against the Bears defense that the last time they were on the field, that was rated 28th in the league against the pass, and is very beat up at this point in time. The Texans are going to be a run-first team, but leaning on that run is going to open up the pass with weapons that have been added to DeAndre Hopkins. It's not going to matter where Osweiler throws the touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins, Fuller, it's not going to matter. He's going to throw the touchdowns. I'm thinking he's going to have 3 touchdown passes and 312 yards.
Yeah, Fuller's looking good. Somebody to keep an eye on for
Absolutely.
sure. I wouldn't run out and add him right now, but put him on your short list if you're needy at wide receiver. My sneaky start for week number 1 is Amir Abdullah, the running back for the Detroit Lions. Last year, he had 143 rushes for 597 yards and only 2 touchdowns. Every year, Jay, the Lions say, this is the year we're going to pound the rock. This is the year we're going to run the ball and control the clock. I believe them this year. This might be the year, and Abdullah might be the guy that turns into a 1,000-yard running back for the Lions. And the reason for that is because Calvin Johnson is gone, and Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback. Calvin Johnson made him a great quarterback, and without Calvin Johnson there, you need another part of that offense. A lot of people have been talking about the wide receivers that they brought in, and the one that was there last year that did a decent job. I'm looking for Abdullah to have a big game in week number 1 and establish himself as the number 1 back for the Lions. Here's why. The Lions are playing the Colts this week. Now, the Colts are perhaps the only defense in the NFL that got worse from last season. They couldn't stop anybody. They're not going to stop anybody this year. If you have Andrew Luck, he's going to throw for 9 million yards this year because he's not going to have a choice. Now, if you find yourself in a bind in week 1 because of a running back you drafted, let's say Melvin Gordon with a tough matchup, I think that if you happen to have grabbed Amir Abdullah late, that you can slide him in and get running back 2 production this week from him.
Sit down, Waldo.
It's all yours, my friend.
All right, this is going to sound like heresy, and I think people might change the channel after I say this. But my tough sit for week 1 is Rob Gronkowski.
Oh.
It's a tough sit, and I have him. But it is a tough sit, and I'm going to tell you why.
You're going to sit that down?
Number 1, the Madden curse. Number 2, he's going against the Cardinals. And it may be impossible to actually convince somebody to sit Gronk. But let me tell you what, with Jimmy G possibly going 1-3, the Cardinals, they're still the Patriots. The Cardinals still have them circled, and they've had 6 months to game plan for one guy. 6 months to game plan for one guy. I believe that if the Cardinals can stop Gronk, there's practically no chance the Patriots can win that game. So if the Cardinals are smart, and Bruce Arians is a very smart coach, second or third best coach in the league, you know he is game planning to stop Gronk. That has been done in the past, but it makes a difference if touchdown Jesus Tommy is throwing the ball or Jimmy G. That might make a slight difference.
I agree. I think that Gronk has a very tough matchup, especially being, alone as far as playmakers go on the field for the Patriots this week. Granted, they have some other playmakers there, but as you said, without that guy right there, number 12, it's a whole different ball game.
Guess who's not throwing him the ball this week?
It's a whole different ball game. My tough sit for this week is Calvin Benjamin. I know. I get it. You drafted Calvin Benjamin. You're all excited about Calvin Benjamin. He had a great rookie season. He makes outstanding catches. He's a big body wide receiver that gets in the end zone. I get it. Let's tap the brakes for a second and come back to reality. Calvin Benjamin is coming off a very bad injury, and he needs to get in there and knock the rust off, something he didn't do in the preseason. And when your head coach comes out and says, Ron Rivera, quote, he may not play as many snaps as he did as a rookie, I want to spread his playing time out over the game. To me, that says he's not ready to go week 1. He's going to be on a snap count or a pitch count, however you want to say it. I believe he's going to get 5 or 6 catches this game, nowhere near his stud production of his rookie year. And you couple that with the fact that while Calvin Benjamin was out, Ted Ginn was forced to create chemistry with other wide receivers, and you saw that.
Cam Newton.
Cam Newton, that's what I meant. I'm sorry, what did I say?
Ted Ginn.
I apologize. And it's a perfect segue to bring us into Wall Street, a little segment that we call Wall Street. Buy low, sell high, one of my favorites on the whole show. I think you know where I'm going, so why don't we start with you?
All right. Well, I have a little bit of a different take on Wall Street this week. I have number 1, it's a 2 for 1. 2 for 1. I'm going to sell high on DeMarco Murray and buy low on Derrick Henry. And I know what you're going to say. How can you buy low on a running back that is carried in 80 to 90% of leagues?
Exactly what I was going to say.
Well, this is not a typical call. DeMarco Murray is starting in 82% of leagues, and Derrick Henry is only starting in 11% of leagues. This is a clear case of one player being overvalued and one player being undervalued. This is the type of situation that I like to exploit. Those numbers are going to change by week 2, week 3. Derrick Henry is going to be getting more starts, and DeMarco Murray is going to go down. Number 1, DeMarco Murray, he might get hurt, he might get old, he might get slow. And number 2, Derrick Henry is a beast. He's going to vulture touchdowns starting week 1, going into week 2, and then by week 3, if you don't have him yet, you're not going to be able to get him. So what I'm saying is you can buy low on him now. If you have DeMarco Murray, I would find the guy that has Derrick Henry and say, hey, I'll give you DeMarco Murray for Derrick Henry and your number 4 wide receiver if that improves your wide receiver. If you don't have either one of these guys, I would go after the guy that has Derrick Henry and find a way to wrestle Derrick Henry from him while his value is low. Yes, he's owned by a lot of people, but if he's not being started, then the value isn't high yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that both players have a little bit of value right now. Which one prevails at the end is yet to be seen, but the Titans could be a team that could approach 50% run. I mean, they are going to run the ball a ton this year with whoever's healthy, with whichever back they have, and possibly both of them. So while I don't disagree with you, I will add a layer of caution in there that I think both running backs will be productive this season. My buy lows this week, I have already mentioned it a little bit in the last segment, is Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn, with last year with Calvin Benjamin out, Cam Newton was forced to form some type of relationship with his other receivers, and he did that with Ted Ginn. Now, Ginn only caught 44 balls, but he was targeted 73 times. He caught those 44 balls for 739 yards, but here's the killer, 10 touchdowns. When a guy gets 10 touchdowns and is owned in just 28% of leagues, it's an atrocity in fantasy football. How is this guy overlooked? He plays with one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. He had a great season last year. I know Calvin Benjamin is back, but the chemistry already exists, and we've even seen it in the preseason. The guy has so much speed that when he gets the ball, at any point, he could be in the end zone. This guy, as I mentioned, is owned in 28% of leagues. I wouldn't start him week 1. He's got a tough matchup week 1 going against Denver. But weeks 2 through 5, he gets teams like San Francisco, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New Orleans. I mean, this guy can definitely help your fantasy team. And if you have a hole at wide receiver, Go out and add him while he's nice and cheap. Even after week 1, I think he'll remain cheap unless he explodes. But I don't see that happening week 1. I see an explosion in week 2, 3, 4, and 5. Get Ted Ginn while he's cheap. Let's move on to the Facebook question, Jay. This one's for you because you're a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. How do you think Doug Martin will do this season? From Tom Tittle.
Well, Tommy boy, I think that might be Tom Brady in code.
You
I think
think so?
He's chilling out watching
He's
the
playing
show.
some fantasy
Certainly
football on
ain't
his
playing football
couch.
this week. Anyways, Tommy, I would stay away from Doug Martin if I had the opportunity. He's definitely not one of the elite running backs. If I could get him as a number 2 running back, I would consider him for a number 2 running back. But he has a history of great year, average to below average year, great year, average to below average year. I believe last year was a great year. So he's on pace for his average to below average year, number 1. Number 2, just got a new contract. That never helps. People kind of get fat, dumb, and happy after new contracts. And number 3, famous Jameis Winston is growing into his own. And I think they are going to be a pass-first team. And when they get down near the end zone, I think Mike Evans is on the verge of exploding. I think Vincent Jackson is going to rebound from a down year. And Seferius, Austin, Jenkins is finally ready to become an elite top-end fantasy tight end.
Yeah.
There's just too many options when they get down there for Doug Martin to get enough to warrant an RB1.
Now, I will mention one thing about the tight end. Remember, he's the same guy who had 2 touchdowns in week 1 and then got hurt last year.
No, I'm a Bucks fan. I remember.
So that's you just got a whole bunch of names. they were all Bucks, but a whole bunch of guys that are potentially out on the waiver wire with Vincent Jackson, Austin Seferian Jenkins, and of course the other 2 are not that you spoke about. I think my opinion is that Doug Martin will have a respectable season. I think that there's definitely going to be some drop-off after last year's contract year, but playing in that offense that you mentioned is going to be so explosive. There's going to be a lot of goal line carries, and Dougie Fresh, as long as he can stay healthy, is going to get every one of those.
All right, so I'm saying not an RB1. You are saying RB1?
I'm saying, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the limited talent at RB1. I mean, like you said, you have those 5 guys. I put Doug Martin in the top 10 because he gets every carry.
He does. That is the advantage of Doug Martin. He gets every carry until Chris Sims can provide a little spark, but that's neither here nor there.
Has not
yet.
He
has not yet.
Jay, your favorite segment, maybe, Weekly Leagues. Here it is. I'm not a huge fan of Weekly Leagues. I tried it last year, won a little money, lost a bunch, and I am all set with all that. I would rather sit at home and set my lineup and play fantasy football.
That's what Weekly Leagues is. You can set your lineup every week.
And it's like fantasy football for quitters.
It is. That's what I call it. Anyways, my Weekly League, as everybody knows, if you watch this show last year, one of the top guys that we were on, whether it was a buy low, sell high, it was definitely a buy low. Whether it was keep an eye on this guy, once he gets an opportunity, we'll see what happens. It never really panned out, but it's going to start week 1, and it already has started week 1. Christian Michael has been named the starter for the Seattle Seahawks. You were able to get Christian Michael much later than Thomas Rawls. Some people drafted Thomas Rawls in the first round. Some people kept Thomas Rawls in keeper leagues. And then boom, week 1, Christian Michael's the keeper. He might take that job and never give it back.
I'm
Thomas Rawls, week 1.
Christian Michael.
Christian Michael, week 1.
I'm all over it. We talked about him last week, I think, just before Thanksgiving, and we really predicted big things from him at the end of the season. It didn't come to fruition. Now he's got his chance. He even bounced around a little bit.
Yeah,
left the
Dallas
Seahawks, came back. But the fact that they brought him back and now he's the starter shows you something about his physical gifts. The guy is gifted, and we're about to see it week 1 all over that Miami defense.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
He's gonna tear him up, and Christian Michael is gonna become a household name after this week.
And I think that a big point that you just said, they brought him back.
Yeah.
I think that speaks a lot because there are certain NFL teams that have programs. The Patriots have a program. The Steelers have a program that really molds football players to what that program is. I think Seattle is developing a little bit of a different type of program where they allow their players a little more freedom to speak freely, speak their mind, do a little bit more outside of the football field and kind of be okay with it. But the fact that they brought him back, knowing that he's been away, he's had issues, I think when they brought him back, they're like, all right, you get what the program is. stick with the program or we'll get rid of you again. And now they name him the starter. I think that's nothing but thumbs up for this kid, and I think he's going to have a great year. I don't think he's giving the job back.
I agree. If you were able to get him, or if you can get him now, that's another buy low.
Absolutely.
Well, he's getting a lot of name recognition right now because he's the starter. But if he somehow went undrafted in your league and you have the first waiver wire pick this weekend, grab. I did
Christian
too.
Michael.
I did it too. So on that note, everybody, that has been that week 1 of That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fancy guys doing it live.
We will see you next week. Good luck in week number 1.